Glad you're all up this morning and here at the convention for the second day. My name is Paul Smith, a proud member of the board of directors of this august organization. And it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. As I'm sure you know, Governor O'Malley has amassed a record in 6 years that must be the envy of many of his peers around the country. On issue after issue, from civil rights to criminal law, healthcare to education policies, Governor O'Malley has delivered results for the people of Maryland, and as a result, has become an inspiration to people across the United States. A cover story this month in the Washington Monthly features Governor O'Malley and calls him, quote, one of the Democrats' most successful governors, and that is certainly true. The article goes on to say that what makes him unique as a politician is that he, quote, arguably is the best manager working in government today, which is quite remarkable praise. The O'Malley administration has expanded health care to more than 380,000 previously uninsured residents. He's helped drive down infant mortality to a historic low and provided meals to thousands of hungry children as the state moves toward its goal for eradicating childhood hunger. Declaring that Marylanders are bound together by a common thread of human dignity, Governor O'Malley signed legislation to provide marriage equality in the state of Maryland. He also signed legislation expanding opportunities at state universities and colleges for the so-called dreamers, undocumented people who came to this country as children. And he signed legislation repealing the death penalty. It is a remarkable record. I could go on, but I won't. I think you'd rather hear from the governor. Please join me in welcoming a man I suspect we will be seeing a lot more of in coming months and years, Governor Martin O'Malley.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Wow. Thanks very, very much. Thank you. Hey. Wow. Thanks very, very much. Thank you. My goodness. What an enthusiastic audience for 8:45 a.m. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you. And Paul Smith, thank you for your kind introduction, and also thank you for your outstanding advocacy at the Supreme Court and standing up for the rights of all people. It was also wonderful to be able to talk a little bit with Caroline Frederickson, a great Maryland resident and the president of the ACS. I want to give a special word of welcome right off the bat here and fulfill my constitutional duties as governor of the state of Maryland to all of you who join us from out of town. And I want to encourage you to stay and to spend on this side of the Potomac. You are cordially invited. I also want to introduce a couple members of my staff who are with us today. One is Cassie Motts, who serves as our Deputy Chief of Staff. You may know her mom, Judge Diana Gribben Motts of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, and or her dad, Judge Frederick Motts. Nobody in the family works, of the U.S. District Court of the District of Maryland. Cassie. It's a humbling honor to be here with all of you, and so many accomplished and talented jurists. And I have to also confess to you, I feel as if perhaps ACS invited the wrong member of the O'Malley family. My wife, Judge Katie Kern O'Malley, is a judge of the district court, and without any argument, the superior legal mind in the family. Of my 6 brothers and sisters, 4 of us became attorneys, including myself. And all of us wanted to be just like our dad, who was an attorney. He went to college only because of the GI Bill and went on to law school only because of the GI Bill. And all of us wanted to be like him. We used to call him Atticus Finch. Like him, we wanted to be able to stand up for for people who often had no voice, whose last hope was the integrity and the commitment of their attorney. And in that sense, I guess you could call your own organization the Atticus Finch Society, couldn't we? By applause, how many of you have seen the great movie To Kill a Mockingbird? Yes? My children tell me all of my movie metaphors are outdated. I'm glad that's not true yet with this crowd. How many of you, like the O'Malley brothers, were also inspired by Atticus Finch? Well, Atticus Finch, as you know from that movie, seemed to be at the time of his client's struggle in court, seemed to be that lone voice for justice in a very loud sea of reactionaries. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But Atticus Finch also believed there was a river of goodness that ran deep and strong in the soul of America. And America needs the American Constitution Society to tap into that deep river. As members of this organization, you recognize that any conversation about justice must begin with an understanding of that concept of the common good. Each of us has a role to play, and whether it's working through the courts or through the political process, in our own communities, our own cities, our own states, our own families. There are some, particularly those who happen to identify themselves with the Federalist Society perhaps, who would argue that government is never part of the answer. And to them, I think we have to ask, well, what then is the question? Because if the question is how to create jobs, how to strengthen our country's middle class, how to create greater freedom and opportunity and, yes, justice for all, then a working and effective government's an indispensable and essential part of the answer. How can we hope to make our society and our laws more just if our government no longer can even function properly? How can we hope to enforce the law if we cannot pick up the trash or reduce crime? How can we hope for equal protection under the law when our own Congress can't get over the obstructions of a minority faction of Tea Party ideologues? And by the same note, how can we be expected to increase citizen engagement when decisions like Crawford versus Marion County Election Board open the floodgates for anti-voting measures in states all across the country? Protecting the principle of one person, one vote is a great challenge when Citizens United makes it possible for governors like Scott Walker to outspend their opponents 8-1 and create an alternative universe over the airways as people make important choices. The choices of the Federalist Society is urging of our courts, the Tea Party is doing in many of our state houses and oftentimes in our Congress. Rather than expanding rights, they choose to restrict them. Rather than expanding opportunity, they choose to constrict it. And rather than strengthening our middle class, they choose economic policies that concentrate wealth and power for the already wealthiest 1% of our nation. And this happens, and this is what happens when we allow the far right wing to stack any of our institutions. They gerrymander right-wing districts and seek to intimidate law-abiding citizens from voting. They flood political campaigns with unlimited corporate cash. They create all sorts of special interest loopholes, and in the hollow cry of freedom from everything, including responsibility, they use the power of their elected officials to steadily dismantle the capacity of our government to actually govern. First, they use the false guise of tax cuts for all and money back for all, which really means money back for millionaires and billionaires, in order to starve our government of revenues. And then they drive up deficits in the hope that they can scare the bejeebers out of all of us from making the sort of common sense investments that have allowed our country to create greater prosperity and greater opportunity for every generation. investments in education, investments in innovation, investments in rebuilding the infrastructure upon which all commerce depends and flows. Now let's give credit, though, where credit is due. By golly, they have been pretty effective, haven't they? But in the process, they've managed to halt middle-class progress for the first time in American history. Think about that. Economic mobility is now lower in the United States, I should say upward economic mobility is now lower in the United States than in virtually any other highly developed country on earth. The ladder of opportunity has been pulled up for millions of middle-class Americans. And you and I understand, if there is no way out of poverty for our poorest neighbors, there is no way forward for America's middle class. And if there is no way forward for the middle class, then the success of our American experiment has come to an end. You and I don't accept that inevitability. Progress is a choice, and their choices would take us back and not forward. And that's exactly why we need all of you to be part of this new movement. A movement that asks not whether a policy is left or whether it's right, but whether it moves us forward or whether it takes us back. A movement that recognizes that the fundamental question about any public policy should be, does it work? Does it make progress? Does it deliver better results for the common good that all of us share? A movement that calls for leadership that is entrepreneurial, that is collaborative, that is performance measured, that creates common platforms to connect and empower more individuals rather than fewer. Leadership that understands the power of human dignity, the strength of our diversity, and the truth that, in fact, we are all in this together. In Maryland, we've made better choices, thanks to the goodness of the people I serve. And we've also been able to deliver better results. We recognize in our state that things like equal rights and inclusion, respect for the strength of our diversity, an open society, and respect for the dignity of every individual and every child's home, these things make our state more innovative as well as more just, more creative as well as more open, a better place for business, a better place for job creation, a better way to build up an innovation economy. On the other hand, things like inequality, things like discrimination, things like division, things like disparity, these are the things that weaken the potential of our creative economy, that hold the power of our innovative capacity back, our ability to create jobs and create better opportunities. And so, in Maryland, we've done a number of things that are moving us forward. We've nominated a record high percentage of women to the state bench, and we've awarded a record high percentage of state contracts, even in a recession, to women and minority-owned businesses. We also passed in the state legislature the DREAM Act. And now at the time, the reactionary voices shouted and clamored that it was free tuition for illegal immigrants, which it was not. It said that if you pay taxes in Maryland and your children graduate from Maryland high schools and can get into a Maryland college, then your family should be able to pay in-state tuition. Now, lest some of you from other states dismiss that passage as, well, that's Maryland, they can do that. Get this. When we passed that bill in the state legislature, it was opposed in the polls that were just done immediately after the legislature, by 55% of Marylanders. But after the fullness of discussion, after a hard-fought campaign, Marylanders approved the DREAM Act in our state by 59% of the vote, that referendum. We have also done more than any other state to make college more affordable for more families. We froze tuition in the middle of the recession in order to advance the cause of opportunity for all people. We made record investments in public education, increasing, in fact, our investment in K-12 education by 51% since 2006, and we are actually closing achievement gaps between white and minority students. Last week, a group declared that no state has done a better job, no state has done a better job on this score. Low-income kids in the state of Maryland have achieved some of the highest gains over the last 8 years, the highest gains of any kids in any state. We also listened when our nonpartisan commission on capital punishment told us, it was chaired by Ben Civiletti, by the way, told us that the death penalty is expensive, it does not work, and it cannot be administered without racial bias. And so we abolished it and we replaced it with life without parole. We also took action to expand substance abuse treatment. We invested more, not less, in better serving our state's homeless population. We worked together to drive down infant mortality, actually exceeding the goals that we had set for ourselves. So of course the reward for that is to set higher goals for the next year. And we fed thousands of hungry children in pursuit of the goal we set as the first state to declare that we would eradicate childhood hunger in Maryland by 2015. We also passed civil marriage equality in the state of Maryland. And when our opponents successfully petitioned it to the ballot, quite frankly, there were a number of people who were advocates for marriage equality who had their doubts about whether our state would be able to defend it at referendum. And given the history, you know how it is. If you're tied, that means you're probably down by 10 points once the election comes around. But when that issue of civil marriage equality came to the ballot, the people of Maryland approved civil marriage equality with 53% of the vote in Maryland. And the message which drew people to that common ground and that common space that allows us to move forward together was a message that focused on human dignity. The idea that we all want the same thing for our kids. We want them to be able to live in a loving, stable, and committed home, protected equally under the law. In Maryland, instead of making it harder for people to vote, revolutionary, we are making it easier for people to vote. We let our citizens register to vote online. We made same-day registration available now during early voting. We've offered early voting on more days, not less, at more locations, and also for longer hours. And we made it easier for citizens to vote by mail as part of early balloting. Opponents of our efforts to enfranchise more Marylanders did not even bother to try to collect signatures to send it to referendum this time. They understood that public opinion is overwhelmingly on the side of more people participating rather than fewer. And what's more, when we passed some really strong nation-leading gun safety laws in our state, along with the repeal of the death penalty, the opponents of those measures failed to accumulate enough signatures even when they tried. So, conclusion. Ultimately, all of these efforts come back to the belief that you and I share in our own responsibility to advance the common good. And the truth that we understand that, in fact, we are all in this together. The future's not inevitable. If we want better results, we have to make better choices based on the values we share, based on the belief we share, and based on the understanding that the most powerful office in the United States of America is that of citizen. The late Judge Leonard Hand wrote that a society so riven that the spirit of moderation is gone, no court can save. A society where that spirit flourishes, no court need save. And a society which evades its responsibility by thrusting upon the courts the nurture of that spirit in the end, will perish. We, the people, have generations of creative, healing, life-saving, and life-giving work in front of us. And we need the work of the American Constitution Society in order to fulfill our nobler destiny and to move us forward. Thank you all so very much, and God bless your good work. Thanks.